Good evening. Hello. Good to have you here. Really glad that you're here. On behalf of the Applied Computer Science Department and Graphic Design Department, Anna and I would like to welcome Filipa Valente to our campus. We're so happy to have you here, and we're very excited to have this shared event between our programs. This is an opportunity to show you how close all of these interdisciplinary programs are, and as future designers and artists, how you can get inspired tonight by looking at Filipa's work and hopefully join together with your friends to pursue this line of beautiful creative endeavors. A little bit about our speaker. Filipa Valente is a Portuguese architect and environmental designer. She's based in Los Angeles. She received her bachelor and master in architecture from Burbank School in London. Then she moved to Los Angeles and attended SciArt to receive her other degrees, master in media art and architecture mediascapes. And currently, she also created Limi Lab. This is a space for her to pursue her creative work. Not busy enough, she also works for, she's the senior designers at the Second Story Experience Design Studio. This is a studio that has offices in New York, Portland, and Atlanta. And we are so happy to have you here. I'm very excited, and I can't wait to look at your work and learn more from your work and you.
Hello, good night. So we have some more information about Filipa. And Filipa has held design and project management positions at different really prestigious practices around the world, such as Zaha Hadid Architects and Future Systems. She's currently the senior environmental designer at Second Story. Her work has been featured in the Architecture Plus Design Museum in Los Angeles at the Skyline 2014 Festival in downtown LA, the Lisbon Experimenta Design Biennale in 2009, 2011, and 2013, at several international exhibitions in Copenhagen, Lisbon, London, Los Angeles, and the ICEA 2012 International Electronics Symposium in New Mexico. Pretty impressive, right? So please join us in welcoming Filipa Valente tonight.
Thank you so much, Anna and Vanush, for the intro. Really lovely. Thank you so much for the invite to be here tonight. I am very honored to be able to share my work. I'll share a combination of personal work under my Limi Lab practice, as Vanush mentioned, but also some of the work I've done in recent collaborations in offices I've worked for. And as Anna mentioned, currently I'm a senior environmental designer at Second Story. I did come from a background in architecture. I practiced architecture for quite a few years. But just to set the scene to why I moved on to this other kind of work around experiential environments is because as I was pursuing architecture design, I started to get a feel of a desire to kind of get a little bit more to the human scale and start to explore spaces and technology integration into spaces and sort of interactivity within spaces. So that's really what's kind of driven me to start doing the work that I was doing in my personal practice, personal art practice and experimentation. So I'll start off by answering what I mean by experiential environments, which is what I believe I do. And for me, an experiential environment really is about integrating 5 very important characteristics. And if you're familiar with sort of UX design or experience design. Some of these will probably be kind of familiar to you, some of these characteristics, but of course I think they apply perfectly to environmental design or environments design. Specifically, the most important one to me, I think, human-centered design, because we as humans need to experience the environments, and they should be designed by putting us in the first place and in the center, and thinking about our needs and how we populate spaces. They also should evoke emotion, and in particular, this one's very important because emotion is really what allows you to remember something later on. So if you feel something, joy or even sadness in an environment that you've entered, that will be what you'll remember after. So it's important to kind of try and build in those emotions into the design of spaces as well. Activating senses, of course, and in my work, mainly I've explored vision and hearing and touch, but at Second Story recently we've actually been doing some research with smell and taste, so there's infinite amount of things you can do with that. Story-driven, because I believe that every environment should have a very strong narrative or something to tell to the user and the visitor. I think that's important to build a good foundation for each space. And holistic, because when you're talking about environments, you're talking about everything around you, including the space you're in, but also objects and architecture, so objects and furniture that is inside as well. So we're talking about linking these two environments that are all around us with experience, which is kind of a human nature, a human condition in some ways. And a lot of the times in my work, you'll see that connective tissue happens through technology. Not always, but a lot of the times technology helps and makes it more interesting. So what do environment designs, what does environmental design encompass? What is it within this field? The answer is there's a lot of things, and I'm not saying that I'm working and I'm designing and I'm doing every single of these crafts. It depends a little bit on the project. Depends on the scale and if I'm working with a bigger firm or not. But the truth is an environment encompasses architecture, furniture, objects, graphics, down to experience designing the spaces and technology integration. And in that sense, environments can be many things, from larger scale museums, a more permanent setup in a museum gallery, for example, to a more temporary event, like a one-day event. It could be a pop-up pavilion, could be an art installation, retail store, facades, shop front activations, etc. So I'll start with one of my own projects as part of Limilab, called Limonite Garden. This project actually started from some research that I was doing at SciArc, as I think Benush mentioned. I did a postgrad here in media arts and architecture at SciArc, and at the time I was fascinated with the idea of recreating sort of environmental data readings from the city, from the urbanscape, things like reading pollution data, light pollution, sound pollution data, and creating physical objects that would actually move depending on that data that they were collecting. And that really kind of was what drove this first project, sort of creating these mechanisms that would be almost like indicators and measurers of environmental conditions. So the first opportunity to kind of apply this concept was in this project that I proposed for the ISEA, an international symposium for electronic arts in 2012 in Albuquerque. The theme for the symposium was machine wilderness, which was already quite a fun theme to work with. But my proposal was basically this, was a an artificial ecology that would be mediating between the gallery space where it was going to be located and using environmental sensors. This artificial ecology organism would be sort of responding to environmental data while at the same time responding to people in the environment around it, and sort of activating these elements to move. Just a little bit more of schematics of how that would work. So we have an outside environmental sensor. We have an Arduino that's picking up a proximity sensor that sensors people around the piece. Breeding script for, because I wanted these to feel like semi-living organisms, so it was important to me that there was some kind of light fluctuation, almost like they were literally breathing. And then the outputs would be light effects and servo movements in terms of the piece moving when once activated. And I have a video here that is kind of describing the same things I just described, but in the gallery setup, so you kind of understand a little bit better. But I will play this now.
Liminoid blooms is an artificial interactive ecology that mediates the space between the gallery exhibition and the environment of the city of Albuquerque. A sensor located at the street facade of the gallery collects environment data from the urbanscape: sound, light variations, and CO2 concentration. The environment sensor sends information to the blooms located inside the gallery, thus activating their breeding and movement behaviors. Visitors to the gallery can override the bloom's base behavior with their presence, causing them to bright up and move depending on how close the visitor is to them.
Yeah, that's just a good description of what it's doing. The way they communicated was actually using a little antenna between the two spots. And before the install, I actually did a lot of prototyping. This was actually some pictures from SciArc of an earlier version of this prototype. And this particular version of it really wanted to explore that human interaction. So you see there the hand is actually activating the lights and a more extreme response from the piece. And I know it's hard, it's not a video, but it had a servo mechanism inside that would try and open up. So it almost got kind of excited in the presence of people. And then this was a piece in the gallery installed. Again, I treated this one like the first iteration prototype, so there was things that I would have changed, but I was really pleased with the interaction with people. You see there, the little the round thing was the actual sensors box that was set up at the entrance of the gallery. So I then was approached by a lady that was organizing this festival, Skyline Festival in downtown LA. She wanted me to recreate the blooms in a bigger, larger scale space, which is the Cooper Design building in downtown Los Angeles. They have a beautiful penthouse. So this meant making these much bigger, so they became a garden. And I can't see too well here, but I started to make studies of how these could, I wanted them to look more and more like plant-like or alien-like, whichever way it sort of goes you'd like to think, but also still integrating the same components, kind of making them a little bit more sophisticated. Another thing that was important, because it was a larger scale of this installation, was creating some way of replicating these in a more modular way. So I designed a sort of what I call a chassis, like a backbone structure that you see there along the back with the pink dashed line. That was basically a series of 3D printed elements that would integrate all the hardware, such as Arduinos and sensors and servo motors, and they could be added on or taken out depending on how big each unit was, each bloom was. So that allowed me to make very, very many variations of the same thing with the same components, but make them bigger or smaller. This is the 3D printed piece. You see there the Arduino and the servo, and there were some moving parts that you then attach the front bloom plastic cover to. The goal was to achieve this sort of in-between hybrid. Is it a machine? Is it a real thing? Is it a living thing? And of course, the atmosphere of the space was also very important. And here comes the kind of whole holistic thinking of environmental design. So the lighting was also very important, and it added a whole other level of complex, more magical environment to the space. And I have a video of the piece that I will show you now. And also wanted to mention, I had also the opportunity to collaborate with the dance theater for the same space and the same project. Heidi Duckler Dance Theater, who are based here in LA. They work with unconventional performance spaces, so they don't perform in performance halls or theaters. They perform in architecture and interesting environments. So they became part of the installation in some ways. I designed the custom LED costume for them to wear, and they sort of would dance in the middle of the installation, kind of activating it multiple times throughout the day. They also did some kind of interesting things with the costume, that they used it as almost like a light prop. So they illuminated the space like what this dancer here is doing, and created kind of interesting little vignettes throughout the event, throughout the night. So that was really, really cool to have them there. Yeah, so this is a photo of, I love this photo because it also shows you the kind of the city busyness and hustle and bustle behind. And this one, you see the kind of traces of the dancers. We did a few long exposure shots. Again, here, long exposure shots with the dancers performing within the garden. Yeah, so now onto another project. This one is a little bit smaller scale, more along the lines of furniture design. It's a collaboration with two good friends of mine, Mina Lajowski and Anders Christiansen. We proposed a bench design for the Experimenta Design Biennale festival in Lisbon. And this was 2009, a while back. But what we proposed originally, we wanted the bench to be an environmentally responsive bench. We wanted to not only have like beautiful design, but also to have some form of reaction to the environment of the botanical gardens, and also of people sitting or hanging out around it. And the Biennale really liked the idea. We went ahead with the design of the orange form there that you see, the orange version that you see there. I will explain a bit better later how we managed to achieve the skin color variation. But first I just wanted to mention the effort. Again, this was digital fabrication. We modeled everything in Rhino, and then we created basically multiple layers that were water jet cut of plywood that then were assembled. And we had to create almost like an IKEA set of parts to help us assemble it after, because it was a little bit tricky because it was not a very simple extrusion. So that was some of the fabrication photos. So here's a solution for our activation of the skin. We didn't want to use anything digital necessarily. We wanted to do something as analog as possible. So we looked into thermochromic paint, which is basically a paint that is treated chemically so that it reacts to temperature. So once it reaches, I think in this case of this product was about 76 degrees, it turns clear, it becomes clear. So that's what's happening there with the hand. If you have a black coating, pigment coating, you heat it up, you will have transparency, so you'd see the wood grain. And it's used a lot apparently in cars, in car paint jobs, and people like the cars to change, from what I've heard. And they like it change throughout the day. So we wanted to do something more fun than just like black and white. So we decided to choose these more pop colors. We used yellow for the undercoating, and then the thermochromatic pigment is actually an orange pigment that you see Anders is mixing there. And I apologize for this video, it's like very pixelated, but you kind of see, it's a very old video. You can see his hand and what it did. It basically leaves a mark, and it slowly kind of fades back to the original color, because this was like end of September in Lisbon, so it was getting a little chilly, but with the hand, the human contact, just the temperature of our bodies, could do things like draw temporary drawings and elements like that. The fun thing as well is also throughout the day, depending on the time, it was in a garden, so the leaves of the trees would cover up sun sometimes, but other times sun would sneak through, and some kind of tones and variations of yellows would start to show. The bottom picture here shows some of it, so it was a little irregular, which was fun. And it sort of achieved the goal. We wanted something that was alive, that was living and responding to the botanical gardens. It's a living environment, and this bench, it was not just going to be a dead life there, so it came to life in this kind of fun way. Next project is a project that also started with a proposal for a festival, but at the time I was already doing some experiments with projection on screen and sort of creating interesting effects with light and transparencies, and looking to create kind of immersive environments immersive environments where you could walk into, but they also have this kind of holographic sort of effect. And this inspired me to propose for the Paseo Festival in Taos, which was a festival of just one night at a time, from sunset until like a little bit later in the night. They wanted to activate a series of installations throughout the city. They wanted everyone in town to come and experience them. So it was important to do something with light, something large scale, so that people could walk into these structures. And my proposal was a structure that would be composed of layers of screen projected on by two projectors, so two sections, also integrating a Kinect sensor, which is not shown on these. But something that would also allow people to get a silhouette of themselves and see that projected onto this environment. But ultimately, the goal is that you would be able to enter this light environment that it was very alien and different from just the location where we were at, which was a park. And these were some of the effects that I was hoping to achieve. And I'll show you a video. It's a little rough video, but this was a first take on this, and I liked it because of I like to show it because the way that people really engaged with the space, I think, was fantastic and along the lines of what I was expecting and hoping for. So I'll show you. Okay, so that project, the kind of behavior from people was really exciting to see, and led me to then kind of work on another version of this for a conference. They wanted a space for people that were in the conference to have a break and kind of have a little bit of a more fun interaction. So I designed a smaller version of it for this conference where the structure also had to be a little bit more sturdy because it had to last for a few more days, and it also allowed me to create, even though it's smaller, allowed me to create a kind of more controlled sort of path through the space. So I designed the screen so that you would walk through it in a zigzag. Again, the depth sensor was still there, so you could still see your silhouette projected and into the screen. It's another view of the scale of it. For this project and the last one, I used MaxMSP to control between the Connect sensor, the projectors, the video selection, and it was a great tool for that. Also sound, and that also allowed me to have a little iPad control, so people could actually choose which environment they wanted to be in, which was really fun. And this one is a smaller scale one, so it's a bit easier to control the amount of people. And then I will show you a video of that final one. That was a fun project. And moving on to now collaborations with other firms, this case Synthesis Design Architecture. I worked at Synthesis, and at the time of the this project, I was associate and project architect. And again, this was also a competition of sorts. It was organized by Volvo Italy to showcase their new hybrid V60 car at the time. They wanted basically the design of a pavilion for showcasing the car. How we approached this competition is to take in kind of the characteristics that were special about this car, which was, of course, sustainability through kind of being a car that is producing energy or working on very low energy, but also the capacity of mobility that is obvious in a car. So we wanted to make sure that the pavilion was portable and lightweight, and we looked at fabric structures that would be easily assembled and disassembled, and also we looked at integrating solar photovoltaic panels into the skin. So we looked at particularly flexible ones as kind of the basis for the competition. So our pitch was you would be able to arrive with your Volvo V60 to your show space. You would take the pavilion out of the trunk of your car. You would anchor a few spots in the floor. You would start to put it together by basically sliding the fabric through these pre-bent tubes, literally like a tent. And we also proposed that you would be able to do that with two to three people. We also proposed that you would then be able to plug your car to the rim of this pavilion because it was covered in photovoltaic cells, so it would be producing energy. And we won the competition. Volvo, I think, didn't get them. It was very surprised and very excited about all of these components together. So the next tough part was to get this built. And we started, of course, doing a lot of drawings, doing a lot of exercises like this in terms of defining some parametric systems to be able to advance with the design, but at the same time maintain some form of optimizing. In this case, for example, it's a system that allows you to maintain only, like, I think 3 different angles for the perimeter rim for fabrication, but you can still adjust the diameter and the height of the pavilion, but you always get those 3 different radiuses, and that would help the process of fabrication, reduce costs, all these things. So we had that in mind from the beginning and applied some of that, those exercises that we were doing already in the office into these drawings. We also did a lot of research around solar incidence. These are studies of where the sun would hit in the pavilion in multiple different orientations. And that was in terms of helping us create patterns for the solar panels so that we wouldn't end up with things like this that are very pretty, but really not as efficient as something like that, which is kind of taking on all that research and applying the biggest PV panels in the areas that were the solar sun was coming in most. So fabrication was pretty interesting. We worked with a company out of Chicago. They were familiar with producing tensile structure pavilions, tensile fabric pavilions. Not so much experience with introducing the photovoltaic panels, but they were great at it. And everyone approached this almost like a prototype, including Volvo. So things like, this is the actual assembled pavilion. Things like these cables sort of hanging out probably would be different in the second iteration, but a lot of the work I am showing you today is anyway kind of prototype level. So so this was it in the Salon del Mobile in Italy. And it basically worked. You could assemble it with 3 people. The only thing that, unfortunately, and it has to do a little bit with technology, is that the charging did work, but we don't, and you don't see it in the image, but we needed to use a very large battery in between the photovoltaic panels and the car plug, because of achieving a certain voltage to make it actually charge. And that did not fit inside the car. But with the new technologies around batteries these days, I'm pretty sure that we could do that and advance it even more. Okay, and now continuing the theme of cars, I wanted to show this project from Second Story. I think this project definitely falls into the category of events. It's like a super minimal intervention with a very big impact, I would say. So it was a big event, and a lot of people watching, a lot of emotions kind of being activated, and excitement around this one night, and potentially even just about a 10-minute song performance. So I'll go straight to the video first, because it kind of gives you a good overview, and then I'll tell you a little bit more about it after. So yeah, that was a fun project to work on. I will show you a couple of R&D that happened. That some of it didn't go through to the final piece, but I think it's kind of interesting to show you as well some of the failures that we encounter as we are producing these projects, but also literally the research that goes behind something so small in essence. So this was some of the studies that our creative technologists were doing at Second Story in terms of looking at songs individually. Of course, looking at the electric guitar, because it was an electric guitar that was plugged in to be sensed. So looking at the frequencies of the song and choosing the right ones that would create the right effects that we wanted on the rigs. To be the most visually most eye-catching and more even as well in terms of what we were trying to achieve. Rolling Stone magazine, when they approached us initially, they were looking into creating long exposure photographs of these rigs as well. So these are some previs that we did of that options. And then we actually did real experiments in the lab with the light rig, testing out long exposure and what we could get from photographs. And because we were using drone photography as well to film the whole event. And then here again, testing the two different lights, because there were two different cars with the two different approaches, two different types of cars. We also tested different positions for the light rig. Of course, in the end, the spoiler, which is the selling part for anyone that doesn't know of the car, was the selected one because it was kind of the easiest one, most exposure. And we basically designed a metal frame that would be strapped onto the spoiler, and then the LED light rigs would be laid on it. They're all waterproof, and then a cover, acrylic cover would be put on top to seal everything up. And what you don't see here, but everything was controlled with Touch Designer. and two of our creative technologists would actually be in the car with the drivers with their computers, which was causing a little bit of motion sickness apparently, because they had to control everything from the car, and they were using antennas and things like that to kind of pick up the signals from the electric guitar. Yeah, but Indiana was a lot of fun, and it was a very fast project, but with high impact, I would say. And Nutella Cafe, I want to share this project. This is kind of the final thing I'll show you. It's a fun, small little project again, but kind of a representative of a lot of different fields working together really well. This happened in last year. Nutella approached us because they were about to open their first Nutella Cafe in the world, I believe, at the time. It was going to be in Chicago. They wanted to create some hype and curiosity around the cafe without immediately revealing its identity. And they wanted to do it at the site while it was in construction. So we basically were brought in to create a temporary facade activation while people behind were constructing it. So again, all these crafts that exist that work at Second Story with me work together really well to get this piece together. And I will just show you a video first, and then I'll tell you a little bit more about it. So those were the windows. There were actually 6 windows. The video says 9, but there were actually 6 pairs of interactive windows. And just to sum it up, what the goal of this intervention was for us at Second Story was to really bring out the exciting things of cafe life, like what is special about going to a cafe. From of course, eating the food and drinking the drinks, to also meeting people and hanging out with loved ones. So we wanted to bring that to the surface with something fun and engaging and surprising and kind of witty, which was great because actually Nutella brand itself has that in their brand too. They do that. If you encourage you guys to check out their Instagram accounts, it's really funny and witty. They all the times like to treat the foods, the foods like characters. So we took that on too, and of course in the group effort of all these fields at Second Story, we came up with 6 different themes for these 6 different pairs of windows. And again, this started with a real collaboration with content, or the copywriters coming up with these really fun and engaging kind of text and copy for these pieces. But also the main piece here was a fantastic illustrator that we worked with that took on and brought these things to life. So for example, this one was called, it's one of my favorites, called Sweet Somethings, in which we're showcasing some sweet items of the menu, the gelato, the muffin, the croissant, and the cookie. And we wanted them to basically talk to the passerbys as if they were characters. So like the gelato was saying, just thinking about you makes me melt. But on the other hand, the croissant could approach you and say, you're on a roll today, keep it up. So those kind of witty things that really kind of were hoping that it would stop people on the street. And then this is where, in some ways, I come in as well to bring these characters to life. So we decided to make them into real 3D suspended sweets, like recreations of sweets. We decided to bring the bubbles to life, so to create something dynamic. So they were actually cutouts with ultra bright screens behind. They were, and they almost, because they were ultra bright screens and matte, they blend really well with the illustration. So the idea is that they would completely camouflage and not seem like screens at all. We had to realistically model in 3D all these foods as well. And then we worked with a fantastic fabricator in Chicago called Acme that produced these pretty much exactly like we had designed, just bigger scale of the foods, as Paige holding the ice cream. And yeah, you can see here the snippet of it. So it looks pretty much like the renders, so they did a great job. But yeah, and then you have the little popping up messages. So that was a fun one. And this is it all together. This is another one that I like a lot. Meet and Eat. It's all about the social aspect of being in a cafe. So we wanted to activate the furniture or the plates in the cafe. In this one, they become the characters, and each one makes a suggestion to the passerby. So we're telling, and we have these two groupings. You can treat someone with something or with an item of the menu, and we wanted them to randomly kind of light up different suggestions for people passing by. And then at the bottom, you have a countdown to the opening of the cafe. So what we did is we made the light box, the plates into light boxes with stencils, so they would light up and suggest those desired messages. This is a prototype of it. So we basically vacuum formed a plate and applied a stencil behind and created a light box. And of course, this is a pattern, just a test pattern, but in the end, the pattern was actually the text. And sometimes they would all light up, other times only one or two would light up. So there was some rhythm, and we designed a couple of different variations of how these things would light up. Yeah, and you see there's two lit up. It's hard to see the text from this one. But... And then this is my favorite, the philosophical waffle. This one, the waffle was quite a big, popular ingredient, it seems, or food in some of Nutella's pop-ups. And we decided to make it into the wise food that would give you kind of wise messages. How we did that, we decided that each one of the little squares of the waffle would actually reveal a phrase or a word. And some of the copies there, as an example, so a lifetime of happiness lives beyond this window. It was all very things related to the food, related to the store, so still within the same kind of theme. So the waffles were in 3D, and then we again placed ultra bright LED screens behind. But instead of just keeping them open, we actually added a mirror surface. One-way mirror that allows you to have a mirror when there isn't, when the screen is not activated, you just see a mirror, you can see kind of a reflection of yourself going along with the whole philosophical looking into yourself kind of theme of the waffle. And this is kind of us testing it on site. And you can see here the little phrases pop up, and you can kind of see the mirror there as well. So once it's not activated, it's actually just your face. So this one also says a lifetime of happiness reveals itself inside or something. And this one says right next to the plate. So yeah, that concludes this. Thank you very much.